Hi. So this time I'm going to be talking with you about 1920s United States. And a lot of times, as we've talked about with other ideas, we like to talk about the long period, right? The long 1920s, the long 1950s. So we're not strictly talking about that particular decade, but mostly that decade and kind of the theme or the idea of it. And one of the big things I want you to take away from this topic, from this decade, your understanding of this decade, is that it was a really complicated time. You had these two parallel movements that are going alongside one another, moving down through time in the same way, but they're very different. You've got, think about the 1920s and what you often think about, right? What do you think about? My suspicion is that the first thing that came to your mind was the jazz music or the flappers, this idea of the Great Gatsby kind of attitude and theme, and the parties and the speakeasies and all of those fun things. Maybe the Harlem Renaissance, or even movie pictures with sound. And if you're an aviation enthusiast, Charles Lindbergh crosses the Atlantic Ocean the first time. So all of this is occurring in the 20s, this great momentum and fun, what we could think about as the roaring 20s, right? The roaring 20s. But at the same time, you have a very conservative movement going right along at the exact same time. You've got this idea of, you've got this conservative movement going along at the same time. You've got prohibition of alcohol, so there's no alcohol. You've got a great retrenchment when it comes to immigration, when it comes to race in the United States. There's a impact, a growth of lynching going on. There's a growth of the KKK going on. Things like the destruction of the Greenwood District in Tulsa occur in the 1920s, and this occurs across the country. So you've got this real backlash and a rise of Christian fundamentalism as well, kind of pulling back on things. And then you've got women's rights, and you've got it's just this very complicated decade to try to understand. We'll see some of those same parallels of change and pulling back away from the change going on in the 1950s. And I would argue that we see that as well today. So those are the kind of big ideas that I want you to look for when you watch that crash course video. Think about those big themes. And then I'm going to have a couple of little brief videos for you on, the roaring 20s and that kind of retrenchment in the 20s as well. But be sure to watch the crash course video this go around. I think he does a good job with getting those basics out there, and has a lot of great visuals as well. Okay.